It is September 27th, 2024. We are at Art All Night in Mount Pleasant. Could you tell us your name?
Hi, my name's Sean Gabbert.
And Sean, what's your relationship to the neighborhood?
I actually grew up in Mount Pleasant. I was born and raised here. And after 14 years gone, when my parents left, I got another place here. And now I live here again, and my son goes to school here.
Oh my gosh.
7 years old.
That's terrific. So, and this may be a little bit awkward, but I'm kind of wanting to know about you. So you were born and raised in the neighborhood. What was the neighborhood like?
Different, a little different.
Okay, tell us.
A lot cheaper. It's always been beautiful. It's historic, all the houses, but it wasn't fixed up as much. And I lived in what Washington residents know as a group house, and everybody else outside of Washington doesn't know what that means. So I was born and raised in a house that had renters, and until I was about 5 years old, I thought we were just really social, having sleepovers, but no. So there were people coming in and out, and Mount Pleasant was very progressive, and that's it's still progressive and everything, but it was quite different. There was a much larger African American community here, which is no longer, which I wish it was, but it still seems to have kept a lot of its flavor on Mount Pleasant Street and everything. So it's nice to be back.
Oh, that's great. So, okay, so group house.
Yeah.
Tell us about that experience, and was it a kind of unintentional community?
It was, I guess, my parents and my parents' friends were just kind of hippie-ish, which they kind of populated a lot of Mount Pleasant back then in the late 70s. I'm 45, so it was around then, late 70s, early 80s, and they had these group houses, and I just happened to be one of the kids that was born into, this group house that was going on, and my mother and father were there running it, but, renters move out, so you have constant turnover and all these new people coming in and out, and it just all seemed normal.
That's good
But
for you. And what brought your parents here?
My father was a Navy brat, so he grew up various places around the world, Naples, Italy being the most influential, and then his father, my grandfather, stopped his career in the Navy in the Pentagon, so then he stayed here. My mother grew up in Chevy Chase, and then so she just stayed here, and so I guess I'm third generation Washington, which is very unique. Most of us just leave, but not me.
But they were also hippies, you said.
Very much so, yeah.
And so what do you mean by that?
I don't know. I mean, just like Mount Pleasant itself, there were a lot of progressive politics, a lot of people wanting to do good and get involved with some organizations for peace or organizations to help the poor and stuff like that. And so there were just a lot of like-minded people that were here. And I think my father found it, and he said to my mother, I found this great neighborhood. You got to come check it out. And I just took to it from there. Back then there were a lot of potluck dinners and stuff like that, obviously pre-internet. So it's similar, but there was just so much community. It was just, everybody was just in each other's faces all the time in a good way.
In a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you basically knew everybody.
Everybody,
Wow.
yeah.
And do you remember some of the peace groups or
I was so young, but there was Sacred Heart Church. There were a lot of people that worked for Greenpeace were coming in and out. They were renting rooms in our house. I'd have to think about it because I was,
You really well, yeah.
Yeah. I was
And you said around 5, you then moved into another house in the neighborhood?
we never owned, so we always rented. So we moved when I was 5 to another house on Kilbourne, a second house on Kilbourne, and then another house on Park Road, then another house on 18th Street. So we stayed within the neighborhood, but it was always the same deal. Large Victorian houses, renting the rooms, much, much cheaper than it is now.
And tell us about what it's like to be a teenager in Mount Pleasant. I imagine that would have been late 80s or
as a teenager, early to mid 90s. So the DC was dangerous. So people complain about crime now, but back then it was a lot worse. So I don't miss that, but there was also, it was more affordable, so there was more flavor. It was like art all night, where it's what you see tonight, they just seem to be going on all the time, kind of thing. But you know, it was exciting. It was fun. I'd say, and I think like any kid growing up in Washington, you're educated, not just in school. There's just a lot of education going on all the time.
In the neighborhood.
In the neighborhood in Washington itself, there's so many different people, so many experiences to soak up.
And so you were undergoing a lot of those kinds of, you were in the neighborhood while the neighborhood was undergoing a lot of those changes.
Yeah, I saw the Mount Pleasant riots firsthand. My friend saw the guy get shot.
Wow.
You know, and then I saw them slowly but surely leaving. I don't want to be sad about it, but because they were priced out, their families were priced out, but you know, I mean, it turns over, and my son now has all these new friends. We never had this experience that he has now, which is a whole neighborhood going to one school. Some of the people who had less money were going to Bancroft, but now Bancroft's a good school, so everybody, I mean, in the morning it's just the mass descending upon that school, which is so nice. That, you know, all his neighborhood friends, anytime he walks around, he just sees his friend.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Okay. So what brought you back to Mount Pleasant after you said you had been gone for a bit of time?
Yeah, nostalgia, sentimentality. I never stopped thinking, I mean, it was just always home to me because it's so unique. I mean, DC I love, but it's just so different to other neighborhoods in DC. And when I had the ability, I was looking to buy a house, and I said, well, let me just look in the neighborhood, and it seemed right. And I was a stand-up comic at the time, so I did that a lot. And coming from New York, I wanted to do stand-up here again, so that was part of what brought me back as well.
Okay. And do you do the stand-up in the neighborhood or anymore?
I did a lot, not much anymore, but I did for years. And there's, I mean, up in Adams Morgan, there's some spots, and there's really been nothing in Mount Pleasant. But yeah.
And obviously the school is important, but what are some of the other places that kind of you identify as kind of a community spaces, important spaces for you?
The library. It's not a space, but Halloween time. It just feels like everybody's getting together. You know, just the square up on Mount Pleasant Street, the farmers market, just a lot of the different restaurants and stuff like that, the gathering places.
And are there any kind of people that are particularly important for you in terms of kind of building community in the neighborhood?
Well, a lot of my son's friends' parents, excuse me, they're like-minded, and they want what I want, which is their children to have a good education and a good neighborhood school community. And so a lot of them, we kind of work together and help the school and help improving things for the kids.
So being involved in the school parents association.
Yeah.
Okay.
PTA.
Okay. 5 years from now, where would you like to see both kind of yourself as well as the neighborhood?
I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere, but I'd like it to continue to. I'd like it to be somewhat affordable, because not everyone can afford it right now. I mean, or just continue to have those options for low-cost housing and opportunities for people to go to Bancroft that are in the boundary or just a little bit outside, which they have, and stuff like that. And just also more events like this, where we can get together and get off our phones and remember that we live in a neighborhood.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, this is just only a question I would ask you, but have you ever told a joke about Mount Pleasant, or?
Well, yes. Well, the group house thing I did, because I used to live in New York and various cities. I would be like, hey, I live in a group house. You can say that to a Washingtonian, but you say that to someone outside of Washington, they think you lived in an orphanage. They're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, no, never mind, it's fine.
That's great. Is there a question you wish I'd asked you?
How diverse was it?
Yeah.
Because you talk about how people talk about how diverse it is now. I mean, there was an article in the Washington Post when I was a teenager that it was literally the most diverse city in the country by percentages. It's not like that anymore, and it's nobody's, but nothing lasts forever. But it was pretty cool. That happened.
And how did that feel? Like what were?
It just felt special. I mean, it was never a utopia. There were,
Sure.
there were, and there was violence all over the city, but it just felt like you were really getting a street education in terms of just people and diversity back then. It was like an Anthony Bourdain episode where you could just, walk around.
That's terrific. Okay, I said that was going to be
No,
my
it's all
last
good.
question, but I was thinking earlier you said that the neighborhood is that you love DC, but especially Mount Pleasant.
Yeah.
How is Mount Pleasant kind of unique in the city of DC? What makes it unique?
It's not as, I'm not saying DC is uptight, but it's not as, people here, in my experience, were less worried about their security clearance being taken away, or, just that kind of vibe. And maybe it's because of the progressive politics and the diversity and all of that, but there just seems something different about it. And of course, we're lucky we have it right next to Rock Creek Park, so we don't have the cross current. So it's just us and Columbia Heights and then Rock Creek. Yeah.
That's good. Any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Get to know your neighborhood. It'll be worthwhile. Communities are a good thing.
I appreciate your time.
Thanks
Thank
so
you
much. I appreciate it.